School District Number 8 Board of Education regular meeting of Monday, February 22nd, 2016 to order. If we could begin with roll call, beginning with the number.
Harrison Howard, student representative, Peter.
Jack Kaplan, student representative, Marlboro.
O'Shea, Marlboro. Bradley, Marlboro.
Castellan, Andover.
Danny Holtzclaw, Andover.
Judy Benson, Clark, Marlboro.
Bruce Olmsted, Hebron.
Superintendent schools.
And Aletta Martek.
We could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I can ask if everyone will remain standing after the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I could ask for everyone just to observe the moment of silence. The life of faith has impacted the district.
Oh, no, there was like, there's a pipe, it was just split.
Brings us to item number 3, public comments. Anyone would like to address the board at this time, please stand. We have a small group here, so feel free to state your name and your town and address the board accordingly. Anyone would like to address at this time, just as a reminder, there is a second component at the end of the meeting as well, or at the end of the agenda if you'd like to add public comment. This is the item number 4, additions to the agenda. Do I hear any recommendations or is there a motion for changes to the agenda? Hearing none, chair has none as well. Brings us to item number 5, report of the administration. Dr. Szymanski?
The first item I have this evening is the school calendar.
Can I ask if you could just bring the microphone closer?
I'm sorry. The first item I have this evening is the school calendar. The school calendar was developed in conjunction with the schools that used to meet in Tucson. And it's based on the state's desire to have a uniform calendar, but it's region specific, so that there could be some positive rules and things. The calendar that's before you is one that's developed in that white. And you can see that we have 180 school days plus 6 exceptional days and the various keys on the calendar. And it mirrors the elementary districts, remembering that some of the elementary districts have longer school years and we have fewer professional development days. So we try to align it as much as we could with the sending districts.
Are there any questions about the calendar? 5.2, review of the handicap accessibility here.
Just to let you know that we submitted all the necessary pages to the Department of Education, to require schematic drawings, and all that was submitted, and we're waiting for the Department of Education to tell us what the next step is. We've also sent out an RFP for engineering services so that the project could be designed, and once that's in, then we will begin the project. But I'm reluctant to go too far down the road until I get some more guidance from the State Department of Education.
Any questions regarding the handicap accessibility or anything status? Bob, can you tap on your mic here and see?
There's a here, here.
Can you hear?
We can hear the tapping, but you can't hear the voice.
Yeah, I'm not hearing it either.
And then right up close.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, that brings us to 5.3.
Is this any better?
You can hear it now?
Thank you, yes.
Thank you. 5.3, budget status report.
Jay?
As of January 31st, the
year-to-date expenditures and encumbrances are $27,486,358, leaving a projected balance of $284,000. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated, my nameplate's gone. To date, we've recorded participation fees around $87,000. They have yet not been offset, have not offset the coaching accounts or the advisor accounts. Along with that, we still have adjustments to be made to the IDA grant. And we're still anticipating excess cost needs and replacement grant money and transportation grant funds. At the last board meeting, the transfers were not approved because they weren't on the agenda. So therefore, all I did was I took the transfer report from that budget projection and just did it over again. So now we get a transfer report. We're looking for approvals and for transfers in the amount of $107,887, and that is attached to the budget projection. The reports are the same that I've always submitted. And again, attachment 4 is new, which is the, which we call the unrestricted revenue report, which shows the revenues that we posted. Answer any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Jim?
On the revenue report,
It's attachment 3.
4.
submit for, right?
Thank you.
I was trying to get a handle on the, well, two things, the use of buildings. We have estimated original revenue of 2148. Now, that is somewhere in our budget from last year's budget?
Correct. It probably is in the front of my book, it showed the managed budget offsets. So in the front of the budget document, it listed the different things that we anticipated getting revenue from. I can send that to the board.
When I looked through the budget, I found 2 items that looked applicable. There was a building use one for $17,471, and a building rental for $20,000. And neither number matches that 2140, so I was confused there. Are we in line to get, I'm not sure how that is, are we in line to get that revenue from rentals, or are we short this year?
I can't tell you. We've brought in 12,700. I'm not, we just did a big billing, so,
Okay.
you know, we were behind on that billing. So I know that the county just did a fairly decent amount of bills. So it should, this report should show a little better than the next time around. Plus, we're going to try, I'm going to move the participation fees up.
The date receipts are showing an increase of $1,000 as of this report. Is that?
You mean since the last report?
Since the original, you have estimated at 5259, which was in the budget,
Correct.
and you brought in, according to this year, credit of 6,333. So we have a 1075 at this point. Is that an extra $1,000?
Well, we also have also have a credit to gate receipts. There must have been something that that was adjusted there. So,
But what I'm thinking we're seeing is that our new policy or new procedures,
Practice.
our new practice is actually netting us some revenue.
I don't know what that's, you're talking about.
Just revenue or net as a surplus? Because it is revenue once the
We need to take a look at the cost of the ticket taker. So
Right,
we have, we'll be looking at that at the end of the year, so we get an overall idea, because we've had to increase the amount of time the ticket taker is working just because of that. So we're trying to, show you what the revenue is, and then once we figure out what, we'll be paying that individual, we can, decide whether it's a good idea or not.
So subtracting out the expense of the extra personnel that were
That's
needed
correct.
to do. Yeah.
this is for the charge.
For the freshman
For the
basketball.
freshmen. Okay.
And that, and we still didn't do the volleyball this year, and then we're still during the season for lacrosse. We tried for lacrosse?
No, we haven't charged for the cross.
That was. And we don't really have any idea of where we are on the pay to play fund compared to last year, or where they were.
We have brought in roughly $87,000 in participation fees. But that also includes clubs.
Right.
It's just not athletics.
Right.
So, so the answer is, we don't know.
Just remember to, when
Yeah, it was just, I guess this is one of the things we really have to steer from year to year rather than, it says we're short for 28,000, but we're in, very much our system. But we don't know
And this
what
report
we
can,
typically get in the spring.
and it also depends on how many people participated in more than one sport, because remember,
Right.
it's one,
But, you know, if we compared it to last year, we had roughly, where we were. What's happening with the virtual high school student fees? Are we not, we're taking a lot of money out of that?
I believe virtual high school was over budget. So,
Well, we're not cutting.
From a revenue standpoint, you thought
now
you were
from,
finding more than much.
for the budget that they put in. And we've already paid all the fees. So, that's why I'm,
We're pulling out a little over $7,000 out of that line item.
Anything else, any other questions?
I can do these questions if you would like, or when we get to where we approve that action, and it's not going to be more detail on the budget.
For the acceptance of the report?
Yeah.
That's up to you unless you have, it depends on how many questions you have.
Let's
Maybe we
go
can do
with
it quicker now, or tomorrow, it doesn't matter, we have a kind of large crowd, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Question to the chart wells, where we have a $56,000 to date profit.
that is Chartwell's report.
Chart wells, yeah.
That is Chartwell's report, so that's,
That's their
you know, different than us paying, we haven't figured, depending on what month's bills we pay, that is Chartwell's determining the money, their sales that they brought in. It doesn't have the other side where, you know, we're paying the bills, we're paying the charges.
How do we know how we're doing in that? I just see a lot more profit, so to speak, in
Right.
this report this year than I ever have.
We picked up roughly $8,000 for the healthy food certification, which is time we receive that money. So we're doing well. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know what the balance is in the cafeteria checking. And then I have to see what bill we've paid up to so far. We've probably paid, this is February, we've probably paid at least up through December.
So we don't really know where we're
Yeah,
at.
that report is obviously something that you always receive. It doesn't really show both sides. For instance, where Amy and I finally saying, oh, there's all this money. It wasn't, because we also, as I get closer to the end of the year, I also charge cartwheels for usage of the building. So I probably would move $35,000 at the end of the year, offset the budget, and charge that. So I just doesn't happen now. It happens when we get closer to the end of the year. So.
Brings us to item number six, the presentation, AHM arrays presentation, permission to conduct survey.
That's not here, so, it was scheduled to be here, they haven't arrived yet, so.
So we'll just move on and go to the budget presentation, and if we have to, because I know they were on the agenda at the last meeting and something came up, so if we have to accommodate.
So if I could just have a minute to get set up.
Yeah.
Because we can't find more, we can't.
Put it over there.
She wants to normally look at the projection view.
You want to put it over there? You can use this thing, move over there.
Bob has just alerted me that the representative from AHM is here, so we're going to revert back to item 16.
Good evening, everyone. Bonnie Smith, I'm a representative from RACE, the Regional Action Council for Substance Abuse Prevention and Behavioral Health Promotion. I am a partner with the Rham Youth Service Bureau for their CHECK coalition. It's their Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition that used to be known as the AHM Task Force. About a year ago, AHM received a grant from the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration, which was quite an honor for them, amongst, at that time, 120 other grantees across the country to reduce the incidence of substance abuse among youth here in the Andover, Hoover, and Marlboro communities. Prior to that, the board was so gracious to allow AHM to fund a student survey through ERACE, which has extensive experience in that process. Those data were used as part of the grant formulation process and enabled them to receive the grant. One stipulation of the grant is the requirement that the survey be conducted every 24 months. So I'm here this evening to say hello to all of you and ask that you consider that to be approved for grades 7 through 12 in the spring of this school year, as was done in 2014. Can you answer questions? I could go on.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Smith?
Can you remind us when it's taken and by which grades? And I know that we discussed the results extensively.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So Dependent upon the schedule of the school, what works best for the school. It's completed electronically by the students. It's completely anonymous, and students may opt out if they choose to, and their parents can also opt them out through a passive consent process, meaning the school will send home a letter saying, this is going to happen on such and such dates with students in grades 7 through 12. We do attempt, it's pretty successful, to survey every student in school on the day of administration. Because it's electronic, many schools have to go through a cycle where it could take up to 2 weeks even for all of the students to process through all the computer labs or handheld devices. Students cannot take the survey at home. That's a question I get a lot. That's not advisable. So it will take about 2 weeks. The time frame in school, it shouldn't take more than 20 to 25 minutes for the average student to complete the survey, especially online. It moves more quickly with skip patterns. So parents, of course, can opt their students out, and there should be a copy of the survey available in the main offices of each school to enable a parent to look at the content. We don't advise posting the survey online.
So if the parents want to see it, they need to contact administration of the school?
Yes.
So can I ask you, I know we go through the survey, and you mentioned first that there was a grant 2 years ago.
The grant's ongoing, but yes, it
Is the
was.
grant for the survey?
The grant pays for the survey, certainly, yes.
So I guess what I'm saying is, it's a great opportunity, I'm glad that we're doing this, but I guess if you could just maybe share with us if there's any expected outcomes beyond the survey that AHM is hoping to use with the results, meaning, for instance, we go through the survey, the only reason I share is this board has had some feedback from members of the community that have come in and have recognized or at least expressed some concerns with substance abuse among students or concerns for their own children, and have come offering their help, offering their suggestions as to what they can do to be more active in this very important issue. And so I guess maybe it's a presentation for another day, but I'm just wondering, does this help AHM plead the case that we need or may need more resources to help us?
That's a really great question, and yes, a full presentation is advisable to go through the science behind how you use data to select prevention strategies in particular communities. But these data will not only just serve the purpose, of course, of meeting the funders' requirements, but will help AHM and the Czech Coalition do their planning and evaluation of current programming and strategies. So they will certainly be looking what's been happening under this grant and other programs and see how the data align with what the outcomes were to be expected. You may look at new and emerging issues that I know many community members across the state are concerned about, and can certainly guide all of you on the board, as well as other organizations in town or within the schools in their own planning of certain initiatives too. So it serves multiple sorts. It's an absolutely use in some cases.
The 2014, and I remember we looked at that, and we had a lot of questions and comments and things. But so, what was, to piggyback, what was put in place as a result of that, or what were some of the responses to that information that the greater community had through whatever, AHM or what was done?
Well, Michelle Hamilton, the current executive director of AHM Youth Services, could speak to the broader scope of the Youth Service Bureau and on how they have used the data. Unfortunately, she was not able to be here tonight. She had an illness in her family. But specific to substance abuse prevention, as the evaluator of the coalition, we have all worked together to take those data and guide new strategies and look at strategies that were initially proposed. So more specifically, the federal government asks that these grantees, and really all substance abuse prevention initiatives, address the community at an environmental level, meaning rather than a one-on-one or classroom-style intervention, you would look at policy and messaging throughout the community. So one example is there's a few different media campaigns that have come out of this that have specifically used data around marijuana to change youth's perspective on how pervasive the problem is. youth often anticipate or expect that the majority of their peers are using marijuana. And when you look at the actual 30-day use rates, it's much less than what they would expect. I don't have those data, they're in my bag. But that's one example. We would say to the youth, 30% do use, but 70% don't. And that's a messaging that's gone out through Rally, the school's newly founded youth peer-to-peer program intended to use a model that the federal government likes, which is peer-to-peer messaging rather than adult-to-youth messaging, to use data to create a new social norm, which is, oh, not everyone's using marijuana, even though we think that's the case. So that's one example of how the data have been used. Another example would be, we know that the youth tell us where they access alcohol, and that's from parents, with them knowing or not knowing. So that's another messaging point, is getting peer to adult, another evidence-based strategy, messaging out to parents, which Dr. Smiski has been immensely helpful in getting messages to show them that we know that you here in Rham schools access alcohol at home first, not from the store, but from home, not from restaurants. So these data sort of guide that, educating adults.
I have one question. Do we survey the parents at all, or just the children?
That's such a good question. Because of this grant opportunity, we have just released an adult community survey. And that's gone out through some of various places in the community. I know it's gone through some email lists and through some one-on-one contact with parents. I'm not the person that implements that, but so far it has 166 respondents. We're hoping to get 400. It would not be a representative sample because of the way that we are using more of a convenience method to gather the data, but it is asking about adults' perception of youth use, adults' perception of harm regarding youth use, the locations that they think youth use, and topics that adults want to know more about regarding substance abuse and mental health.
And when will those results be out?
I would expect in May.
And is that just this community or?
Andover, Hebron, and Marlboro. Yes.
Is it possible maybe to do a second blast of getting that out? Because I know I haven't seen or heard anything of it or read anything about it. So
I'm sure that is.
it's such a critical, I mean, not just to me individually, I'm just saying, is there a way that through other channels that we can get this out? Has it been into the River East at all, you know?
I'm not sure. Haley, who manages all of the outreach for the Czech Coalition under this initiative, would know, and she would be thrilled to have more opportunities to send it out.
Well, I know in Andover, I was
Check.
I can
Is it
try
new?
to distribute it, but I mean,
Sure.
I haven't heard of it yet, so, but I'm anxious to get as many people to respond, because that's, I think there is a, just in my professional observation, there's a disconnect between us parents and our kids, and people have conceptions as to what is and may not, or maybe it is.
And that's across the board in
Yeah.
the communities we serve. And the Czech Coalition is the Coalition for Healthy, Empowered Community, to broaden the scope and have a more positive emphasis rather than something like a task force, which can come across as a little bit of a punitive nature.
Is that statewide or is that specific?
Specific to Andover, Hebron,
So
and
that's
Marlboro.
their acronym?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
When the data is collected, is it just reported to this Czech coalition or compared across different communities in the state or nationally?
That's a really great question. The data are compared with the state, the region. So Erase collects data in about 13 towns. And the data are, from the last 2 years, are put together to create a regional sample. So it's compared regionally, so you get an idea of how Rham compares with neighbors. And then the state, and we compare that to the Youth Risk Behavioral Surveillance System from the CDC, which is put through the state through the Department of Public Health. And then, of course, the nation, which is part of the larger scale of the Youth Risk Behavioral Surveillance System. We compare also to Monitoring the Future and the National Household Survey where appropriate, but the Youth Risk Behavioral Surveillance System, also known as YRBSS, is most comparable to the way these data are collected because it's done in school, whereas other data are done on the phone, which presents its own bias.
Any other questions?
Yeah, does this student data relate back to anything with regard to student activities? So do you compare the data collected versus activities the kids may be in?
There are questions in the survey that have to do with what types of grades you typically get, and how many hours you spend alone, and what type of extracurricular activities you participate in. And we do a cross-tabulation of how students getting mostly A's, how their data, for example, shows with their use rates. It's a really good measure. I can't recall these data from this community specifically, but oftentimes there's an assumption that the more activities a youth is participating in, the lesser risk of a substance use. And we don't always find that to be true in other communities.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks so much for your time.
Opportunity 6.2, 2016-17 budget.
Yes, please. Everybody got copies? Any questions? I'm sorry? I'm sorry. Am I good? Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Well, this is the superintendent's initial budget, and I think going forward, I think that we look at the budget goals, and we want to continue the very program that we have, the statutory requirements. I think that one of the new things that's there is the ESSA requirements for teacher evaluation. We're going to have to be redoing the teacher evaluation instrument to comply with the new federal legislation that's been enacted. And then the other thing that we're looking to do this year is to eliminate level 3 programming, because that has implications for special education. And we wanted to address some of the facility needs. The highlights, we're reducing teaching positions. We're going to be funding the SRO. We're going to, as I said, some facility improvements. And we're going to be using E-rate funding to improve our network. Now, the highlights, we honor all labor agreements. We put in place the middle school academy, which will allow students to proceed at their own rate. We have currently 40 students enrolled, and we're looking at that as a model going forward to help us with some other changes that we're looking forward to implementing. I think that, let's get the big question out of the way. We're looking at an increase of 1.63%, or about $452,000. That's the total increase that we're looking at this year. I think that one of the other things that we wanted to make sure of, remember during the initial discussions of the budget, I said the coordinators would be available. And these are the nights. February 29th, we're going to have art, music, social studies, science, and math. March 7th, the other group, and March 14th, the last group. What I'm asking you to do is if you have any questions for these people, please email them to me so that I can get them to those folks, and then they can be prepared to answer them for you.
But we will have their proposal to look at, to draw, to
Yes, you will.
formulate our question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you'll be getting that later this evening.
Okay.
That's what that box, that all the carts are, the boxes on that cart are. So just remember those dates, and then those are the dates that would be available to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, staff reductions. We're looking at reducing 4 teachers. The .4 in social studies is a little, it should be .2, because remember during the last half of calendar 15, the board added a .2 music teacher. So we're looking at reducing the 4 staff positions. These staff positions are through retirements, and therefore we won't incur any unemployment costs. Looking at the budget, I think that you can see that salaries and benefits make up about 68% of the budget. You can see where fuel is, utilities, tuition, transportation, and payment on the bonds. Kind of just to look back at where we were last year, just looking at the referendum statistics, just as a reminder as we go forward through the budget season. I think that looking at the budget history, you can see where we were in 9-10, where we were in 13-14, 14-15, and then where we are in 16-17. We're looking at an increase of 6.3%. The appropriations that we're having contained in the budget, we've worked on an agreement with the Hebron Town Administrator. We're in the process of finalizing that. The legal counsel is in the process of reviewing it and be sure that we touch all the bases necessary for an SRO. We'll be using a Hebron constable. We'll be paying him, and he will be on site doing things in the building. And then we're continuing the appropriation of $100,000 for special maintenance projects that are listed in the materials that we'll be giving you. And looking at what we'll be buying for textbooks, we'll be buying math books, some science books, and social studies. Social studies is important because those are the AP course textbooks. And since the AP program dictates the curriculum, we don't have any choice but to continue to purchase those textbooks. And the math books for $19,000 are to replace some old geometry books that are pretty well worn. Health insurance, I think it's interesting to note that the two major bargaining units from the group that the board deals with are in the high deductible health plan. So we're realizing the savings that come forward with that. And you can see how the premium differed. And there's been, on last Thursday, we had received notification that the principal would be, health insurance premium will be going down about 1%. I haven't received the calculation, so that further reduction is not included in there. We'll be, as soon as I do get the data, we'll be reflecting that in there. But you can see, just because going to the high deductible health plan, it's had a significant impact on our health insurance costs. Contracts, these are the contracts that we'll be negotiating, that have been negotiated that cover this year. You can see the administrators 2.1, non-certified 2.0, and the certified staff 0.75. These are contracts that were all negotiated in the past, and the cost of those contracts is reflected in the budget. Technology, we're looking at continuing the one-to-one computing Chromebooks for grades 9 and 10. We're looking at network enhancement. In other words, we want to broaden the network, put some new servers in, and create some redundancy within the network. And then continue with the replacement schedule for computers that we've had for teachers in the past. We want to continue that. The fuel budget, I think you can see here because of something we're all experiencing in our own lives. the way fuel savings has impacted that, and we're obviously reflecting that in the budget. We probably will burn about 110,000 gallons of heating oil, and you can see how that carries through. The maintenance budget, you can see the comparison of the maintenance budget for the 2 years, 15-16 and 16-17. And what I've done for you is just listed some of the categories under there. You can see where maintenance supplies has been increased. We're going to be increasing the amount of money for parking lot repairs and for improvements in the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning system. School choice, you can see that school choice, we're up 2 students from last year. We're just keeping an eye on that because in some instances, in this particular instance, where we pay the tuition, and remember that they have almost can opt into that at any time during the school year based on the acceptance rate, or if someone leaves and there's a vacant seat, another student can take that student's place. The financial impact of school choice, you can see that it's up about $2,000. You can see the VOAG tuitions and the magnet school tuitions. Those are monies that the district has to pay out to those schools. The VOAG tuitions, by the way, go to Lebanon, and some of them go to Glastonbury. The enrollment, the middle school, we're looking at an enrollment of about 533 students, down about 34 students. In the high school, we're looking at enrollment about 995, we're losing 28 students there. So you can see that we're trying to reflect the changes in, they're trying to reflect the decline in enrollment with staff reductions. One of the things we need to be very careful of as we look at staff reductions is to be sure that, for example, if we cut a 0.2 chemistry teacher, a person has a 0.8 position, we know that since that's a shortage area, that person would go to another district very quickly, and we would be without a chemistry teacher. So when we're planning staff reductions, we need to be very strategic and to be sure we don't impact programming. Special education, you can see where the tuitions are in special education. The private school tuitions, the tuition to a RESC, and then out-of-state tuitions. And remember, the tuitions that we pay for out of this, indicated here, are tuitions that are based on a decision made by the planning and placement team, so that parents have literally the final say, because the burden of proof is on the district to prove that a placement isn't appropriate for a student. Special education expenditures, this just gives you an idea that from 2010 to 2014, special education expenditures increased by 11.9%. In Region 8, they increased by 10.4%. So we're a little bit behind the state average. Special education rate by district, and I think it's important to note that looking at this, one of the reasons our expenditures are a little higher than our sending districts is because we have more students that are going out of state, and we have to service the 18 to 21-year-old population. So those have an impact on our budget. Yes. I'm sorry?
You said out of state placement.
Yes. Out of state. We have 2 youngsters, as I recall, who attend school in Springfield, Massachusetts for a specialized program. Special education enrollment, you can see how we compare 15-16 to 16-17. You can see the increase at the high school and the outplaced. So that just gives you a comparison year over year for special education enrollment. The prevalence rate, you can see this is the number of this is the percentage of students that are enrolled in special ed. The 13-14 statistics are the latest that are available. You can see the state average is 12.4%, and you can see how we fit in in the towns in the area. So we're just about average in the number of kids that are identified for special education. The percentage of special education, it's interesting, we say this every year. The local cities and towns pay about 60% of it. The federal government, who writes all the rules, pay 10%. So you can see how the equity is there. Excess cost and placement grant revenue. I think it's just important to take a look at this because we've had to reduce our projection for excess cost to about 70% because of the governor's budget cuts. Those are monies that come back. Remember, the excess cost is equal to multiplying a per pupil cost times 4.5, and then taking the tuition and subtracting that from that 4.5, and the difference is what we get in excess cost. Right now, we're projecting to get about 70% of that. Again, I think that it's interesting to note that the local share of education continues to grow. The state is at 42.9, the Fed's at 5.2%. Revenue, I think that this was part of our discussion this evening. Pay for play, gate receipts, interest. I can remember in the old days, back about 5 or 6 years ago, the interest was about $200,000 and was a great budget offset. It's just not there anymore, just because of the circumstances that we're all dealing with.
Why, again, is the use of buildings so different? I know it's only February, I know that there are dance recitals and all kinds of things here, but, I mean, is that projected to be anywhere near the 14, 15 number?
I think that there were a couple of things. As Jane indicated this evening, there's a lot of billing done.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, the busy time for building rentals is usually in the spring when all the dance schools have their recitals.
Sure.
So those are some of the things that we're looking at.
16 number could still be closer to last year. You can still be,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure, okay, thank you.
And then the state grants. You can see that where we stand with the state grants, how they compare. Notice the transportation grant, that's down this year. That was another budget cut proposed by the governor. In federal grants, you can see that we're down slightly in federal grants. You can see that IDEA, that's the big special ed grant, is down slightly. And again, that means more local funding for special education. Average per pupil expenditure. This is how we compare to the towns around us. Again, these numbers are from the Department of Education. And, I think just looking at our programming compared to the sending districts, our programming is richer and is more complex and is more expensive. Looking at how we compare to the surrounding towns that have high schools, I think E.O. Smith is probably the closest to us because that's a 9-12 school. And you can see the how they're $17,000 per student compared to our $13,000 per student. I think the levy to the towns, and this is, remember, this is based on the October 1st count, so that those are the proportions that go in there. And then the projected levies to the town, going out 17, 18, and all the way to 19, 20. So that's the way the population will be shifting. You can see that Marlboro's goes up, Hebron's goes down, Andover's remains about constant. Okay, the budget summary. We're proposing a budget of $28,581,000, and our anticipated revenues are about $357,000, giving us a budget increase of about $452,000, which is a 1.63% increase. And again, the levies to the town in dollars. Again, this is based on the 1.63% increase. That concludes my budget presentation. I have budget books that we'll be distributing. We have the financial pages, then we have the backup from each of the departments. that we'll be handing you at whenever you'd like to get them.
Are you taking questions now, Bob?
Sure.
I'll start with the board.
I thought we were gonna separate the capital into its own budget.
What I did is, but I wanted to be sure that you were trying to make this project through there. So if you could accept your recommendation.
Still present money now.
So I just want to be sure that I had something in there to address those issues, because if you would recall, it's $400,000 over 5 years. And one of the things that we're looking at is to take those and chunk them off and reduce them quarter. And then when the bonds would ultimately refinance, paid off to the bond amount that would be obviously less than the payment of the bond, then use that for the capital improvements. And when you look at it, the last bond will be paid for in 21-22. That's about 4 years away. So that if, following my line of thinking, if we did each one of those things, we did about $100,000 a year for 4 years, and then we began the preparation to have another bond for whatever amount the board decided, that still would be less than the construction bond.
I'll leave the detail questions in a second. The one-to-one, is that another one of those rent-to-own, or is we going to pay it out?
We would be renting, it's a lease purchase,
We'll be in that for the next 4 years?
4 years,
And next year we'll have another one,
5 years.
5 years? Fine, so we're actually being replacing them before they expire.
No, the ones that we're buying have going to technology, so it's have a lifespan of 5 years.
You're going to have a price, I
Don't
doubt
forget-
that very much.
Don't forget, these are Chromebooks, so
Yeah.
the number of moving parts that they have, they were using the cloud for the memory, so that these are very different machines.
5 years is a long time.
Thank you, Bob. Any other questions?
At the conclusion of the hearing, I'll distribute the books.
I was asking you questions. Oh, first, I'm sorry, let's see.
So you're indicating you're eliminating all level 3 classes?
Yes, sir.
And then you just are removing teachers based upon 3 that are retiring. Do they match up?
Yes, they do. And what we ended up doing is we had to move some from the high school to the middle school.
Okay.
So that we had to do that. That's the way we've, because that's the production of staff.
And then the other question is, a lot of things indicate that there's a classroom of less than 10. You're starting to look at those numbers.
One of the things we need to be careful of is that there's a board policy that says we should have no less than 10 kids in class. But a lot of classes with 10 students in are the honors and AP courses. So that's those are the things we need to be careful of. And that also speaks to my comments earlier when we were talking about reducing positions. We might be able to try to point to a chemistry teacher, but that person would leave us. So we need to be very judicious going forward that way.
We don't have this.
No.
So the .2 reduction in reducing teacher, we just added that in last year.
That's right. Remember, we had a .6 music teacher, and then the board added .4, and then the person who take over the auditorium duties to make it 1.0.
So why are we reducing it?
I'm sorry?
So why are we reducing it again?
No, I had to show that in there, because if you looked at it, we reduced 1.4 teachers, but it netted out as a .2 because we added a .2.
And I don't know where we talked about the field improvements, the track field, resurfacing and all that, where is that?
What that is, that's what we talked about, a separate article for capital improvement. We talked about the grant that we had filed with the senator, looking for funding there. So that, I thought that those would be discussions that could take place. We were looking at trying to do some of the things within the facility to look at that four-year report, to look at the report and address it in essentially quarters. And then however the board wanted to handle the other piece of it, we could discuss.
Can I add to that? And the two things that I see is the track and the driveway. If we don't do the maintenance on those, we have a good chance of losing them, which will cost us a lot. So if we're not gonna get that grant, we have to come up with a solution to at least those two projects.
Is it an indication that we're not going to get the funding?
I know the state has let some of the grant out, and I don't know, I've emailed asking what the status of the balance is, and I haven't heard some response back.
It was about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I don't know. Sue? Sorry, Mary. Sue?
Thank you.
Carol?
Okay, fine. We'll be going into greater depth and questions at subject convention meetings, so.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. That brings us to item number 7, reports, committee reports. First committee up is communications.
This is our first meeting as a new board. It's now
Facilities?
Yes, we met last week, and we had, well, one thing is, baseball, tennis, field safety netting, bids are due in tomorrow. So very soon, we'll know what the results are, and if we can try to for perhaps at the next meeting, or perhaps at one of the next meetings.
We don't have to approve that, right? We've already approved. The whole inflation net we approved before you were on it.
Yeah, we have to review the bids and approve. Can't just award.
We also discussed the issue of liability and limits of liability for volunteers within the school and outside on the grounds. And we discussed the difficulty of setting limits, so we came up with a number of recommendations on how to put that to policy to consider. And,
Can I ask you a question? Were you talking about liability insurance protection?
that was one of them, one of the
So,
items.
meaning to increase the amount of insurance that the district purchases for liability? Is that what you're talking?
That's
Well, yeah,
one item.
there's no, right now, there's no coverage for volunteers. There is a quote on what the cost would be on a per incident.
So the current policy does not extend to volunteers? There's a general liability policy?
What would happen is if a group of volunteers, for example, the school board, and it got knocked down, become a firm, the board would be liable, whereas if the contract is up, the contract insurance is on. So the insurance to cover any injuries that somebody might sustain during the volunteer, then it would be a policy for about $300. And that's the quote.
And that's my question, because if you want to be happy to look at the policies, it's interesting that someone would carve out coverage of the general liability for volunteers. Really?
So it's a totally medical expense.
That's different.
Yeah. That's
We're
what I'm
talking something totally different.
It's liability as far as something.
I'm talking, you have a volunteer, let's say we have a volunteer coach who's coaching one of our, or volunteering to be part of one of our student groups. Something happens, regardless of what it is, and it's a lawsuit that alleges some act of negligence on behalf of that volunteer who is essentially volunteering to work for us to perform whatever services to